You're in the middle of something. Maybe you're eating. Maybe you're driving. Maybe you're standing in the shower and the water has gone cold, and you have no idea how long you've been standing there. And then you realize you were gone. Not asleep. Just somewhere else entirely. Replaying a conversation from 3 years ago. Reliving a moment you haven't thought about in months. Drifting through something that already ended. Why does that keep happening to you? The easy answer is that your mind wanders. Your attention drifts. Something triggered a memory, and your brain just followed. But the real answer is far stranger than that. Your brain is not revisiting the past because it lost focus. It is revisiting the past because it was built to. And what it is actually doing during those moments has almost nothing to do with nostalgia, and almost everything to do with survival. Let's start with something most people never question. When a memory comes back to you, you assume you are simply remembering something that happened. You assume that somewhere in your brain there is a stored recording, accurate, fixed, waiting to be played back. But that is not how memory works. Not even close. Psychologist Martin Conway spent decades studying what he called autobiographical memory, the personal history your brain constructs and maintains about your own life. What he found fundamentally changed how scientists think about the past. The memories you replay are not recordings. They are reconstructions. Every single time your brain retrieves a memory, it does not press play on a stored file. It rebuilds that event from fragments, scattered pieces of sensation, emotion, context, and expectation, assembled in the moment of recall. Not stored. Rebuilt. Which means every time you replay a memory, the act of replaying it changes the memory itself. Think about what that actually means. The version of the past you are currently living inside your head does not perfectly match the version that actually happened. It never did. It never could. So why would the brain store memories in a format that gets altered every single time you access them? Why build a system this fragile, this revisable, this open to distortion? The answer goes back much further than you might expect. Your earliest ancestors. Not the ones who built cities, not even the ones who painted cave walls, but the ones who came long before language, before fire, before any tool more complex than a sharpened rock. Those ancestors lived in an environment where a single mistake could end everything. A wrong turn. A bad piece of food. A predator encountered at the wrong time of day in the wrong kind of open space. Survival in that world was not primarily about planning the future. It was about recognizing patterns fast enough to act on them. And the fastest way to recognize a pattern is to replay the last time you encountered one. Neuroscientist Endel Tulving was one of the first researchers to clearly map the cognitive system responsible for this. He called it episodic memory, the capacity to mentally time travel backward to a specific moment in your own life, to re-experience it as if from the inside, embedded in its original context. Tulving spent decades demonstrating that this system is extraordinarily rare in the animal kingdom. Most creatures on Earth do not have it. They learn associations. They respond to stimuli. But they do not replay. You do. And Tulving argued that this capacity, this ability to mentally travel back and forward through personal time, is one of the defining features of human consciousness itself. But it comes at a cost. The same system that lets you replay a memory of laughing until you cried with someone you love also pulls you back, without warning, to the worst moment of your life. The same machinery that carries you back to the smell of a kitchen from your childhood also deposits you in the middle of a conversation you cannot take back, at 3 in the morning, when you have nowhere to go with it. Your brain does not discriminate between useful replays and destructive ones. It does not weigh the productive value of a memory against the pain of revisiting it. It returns to what it registers as unresolved. That word matters enormously. Unresolved. Martin Conway's research found that the memories that surface most persistently are not necessarily the most emotional or the most dramatic. They are the ones that create conflict with how you currently understand yourself. If your self-image is built around being a loyal friend, and you once did something that contradicts that, your brain will return to that moment again and again. Not to torture you, to process it, to update the internal model, to reconcile the contradiction. Conway called this the self-memory system. Your autobiographical memory is not a neutral archive. It is an active tool for identity construction. Every time your brain replays a memory, it is doing maintenance work, patching the narrative, cross-referencing past behavior against current self-concept, deciding what the story of you actually says. The past is not behind you. It is being actively used right now to figure out who you are. Now here is where things get genuinely strange. In 2010, a team of researchers at Harvard University developed a smartphone application that pinged participants at random moments throughout their days and asked them two questions. What are you doing right now? And what are you thinking about? Psychologist Matthew Killingsworth led the study, which eventually tracked the moment-to-moment thoughts of more than 2,000 people across a wide range of activities. What the data showed was stunning. People were not thinking about what they were doing nearly 47% of the time. Across almost every activity measured, nearly half of every waking hour was spent somewhere other than the present moment. And the most common destination was the past. But Killingsworth's findings contain something that tends to get buried when this study is discussed. The frequency of mind wandering was not neutral. The people whose minds wandered most were not experiencing more creative insight or greater emotional processing. They were consistently, measurably less happy. It didn't matter whether the memories being revisited were pleasant or painful. The act of being pulled out of the present, regardless of where the mind went, was itself associated with lower well-being. Your brain built this capacity as a survival mechanism. It runs it constantly and automatically. But the environment you now live in is radically different from the one it was designed for. In the ancestral world, replaying the past had an almost immediate payoff. You remembered which plague caused the sickness. You navigated back to the water source. You recognized the terrain where the predator had been spotted before. The gap between retrieving a memory and using it to act was almost nothing. The loop closed quickly and completely. Now, you replay a conversation from years ago at midnight, and there is nothing to do with the information. The thread is not outside the door. The person is not in the room. The moment cannot be revisited, corrected, or resolved by any action you can take right now. But the machinery doesn't know that. The machinery just knows the loop is still open. And so it runs again. This is the trap. Ancient equipment. Modern context. The tool still works. The world it was built for no longer exists. Philosopher and cognitive scientist Daniel Kahneman spent much of his career mapping exactly how this plays out in the human experience. Kahneman drew a distinction between what he called the experiencing self and the remembering self. The experiencing self is the one living through your moments in real time. The remembering self is the one who edits, narrates, and stores the story of those moments afterward. And these two selves, Kahneman's research showed, frequently disagree. Sharply. What you remember about an experience, and what you actually felt during it are often dramatically different things. And the remembering self wins almost every time. It is louder, more persistent, and more influential. It controls how you feel about your past, how you make decisions about your future, and how you evaluate the overall quality of your own life, even when its account of events is objectively wrong. The remembering self has a specific and well-documented bias. It overweights endings. It overweights peaks, the most intense moments, the highs and the lows. It almost completely ignores how long something actually lasted. An experience that was difficult for an hour but ended warmly will be remembered far more positively than an experience that was pleasant for a full day and ended badly. A vacation that ended in a missed flight becomes a disaster in the archive. A difficult relationship that ended in a tender, honest goodbye is sometimes remembered as one of the great loves of a life. Your memory edits. It shapes. It compresses. It rewrites. And then it hands you the final version and says, "This is what happened. This is who you are. This is what the past says about your future." Now here is the part that changes everything. When you understand this system, not just intellectually but in the moment, when a memory surfaces uninvited, something shifts. The memory is not a malfunction. It is a signal. Your brain is running its oldest, most fundamental program. It has flagged something unresolved. It is asking for a closing statement, not a verdict, not a punishment, a context update. The memories that return most relentlessly are almost always stories about the self that haven't been updated yet. You are not the same person who lived through that moment. The situation has ended. The consequences have unfolded. What came after has already happened. But the file has not been closed. The record still reads, unresolved. And so the system keeps pinging. Closing a memory does not mean forgetting it. It means giving it a different position in the larger narrative. Not a false one. A more complete one. One that includes what you know now. What you became in the time since. What actually followed from that moment. When you can do that. When you can give the memory an honest ending that accounts for the full arc of what happened, your brain accepts the update. The loop closes. The replay stops. Conway called this the motivated reconstruction of the past. It is not self-deception. It is the brain doing exactly what it was built to do, building the most useful, most navigable version of your own history. A history you can actually live from. There is something else worth knowing. Physical movement has a profound effect on rumination, not because it distracts you, but because it closes loops. Your ancestors did not lie awake processing the predator in the abstract. They ran. They moved the camp. They did something physical with the information the memory gave them. Your body still expects that response. When you move, something in the system registers. Signal received, action taken, loop closed. The replay quiets, at least for a while. Tonight, something from your past is going to surface. It might be trivial. It might be something you have been circling for years. And when it does, you will know what it actually is. Not a distraction. Not a weakness. Not proof that something is broken inside you. It is your brain running the most sophisticated prediction engine evolution ever produced. Scanning the archive, looking for an open loop, searching for the signal that the pattern has been resolved and it is safe to move on. You started this thinking your mind simply wanders. But now you know the truth. When you drift back into the past without meaning to, you are not losing the present. You are maintaining something essential. You are keeping a system alive that has been running, without interruption, since before your ancestors had words for what they feared. Your mind was never just wandering. It was always looking for a way home.